Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Python basics and the built-in data types. Python has 9 built-in data types divided into several categories. First is the numeric category with integers, floats, complex numbers. Next is the sequence category with lists, strings, and tuples. Then there are mapping data types, which is a dictionary, a Boolean data type, and the set data type. These data types provide the foundation for larger, more complex data types, such as IP addresses or the NumPy array. So starting out with our numeric data types, we have the integer, which is your counting numbers, so numbers like -1 or 2 or 1 or 0. The next type of data is the float data type, which are going to be your decimal numbers like 0.25 or 3.14 or 9.8. Next, we have the complex numeric data type, which has to do with imaginary numbers. An imaginary number is a number that is the square root of -1. Most of the time, you would see these indicated as an I, so you would have 1I or maybe 3I in typical math. However, in Python, because the I is used in so many other scientific methods, they use the J character. So something like 3J. So if we were to take 1 plus 3j, and that, as you can see, is a complex number. It's got a real portion and then an imaginary portion. So if we were to make this equal to a, so we now have it in a variable, we have, as you see, 1 plus 3j, and then you have a real portion, and then you have a imaginary portion, which shows you that there is 3 of the imaginary j's, or square roots of -1, and 1 of the actual whole numbers. Next, we move into the sequence data types with the list. A list is sort of like an array in other languages. It's a dynamically sized sequence of objects. It can contain any data type. It is ordered, so if you put whatever order you put things in is the order that you'll be able to pull them back out. And it can have duplicates. So we could have an array that is, let me clear the screen here. We can have an array that is 1, 2.0, and then we'll put a complex number in there, and then we'll have another 1, and then we'll have a string. So if you look, we have all of these different values here, and you can grab them through what's called subscripting, where you can grab their specific index starting at 0. And as you see, both 0 and 3, subscript 0 and 3, are the number 1 because you have 0, 1, 2, 3. So you can have duplicates, and they are ordered, and you can pull the values back out. Next, we have the sequence, which is the string. So a string is just a sequence of characters, much like you would have in a list or an array. However, a string cannot be changed after you have created it. It's kind of like a list that only creates or only contains characters. And there is no character type in Python, which is for like a single character. However, the way to use characters in Python is just a string of a length 1. So if we have a string here, we'll call it hello, and then we'll make a list as well. L. I am not typing well today. So now you can see if you look at A, we have the string hello, and if you look at B, we have the list hello, and just like a list, you can subscript into an array and get that first character. However, if you wanted to change that first character, you can't do that with a string. So if we were to say that we want to change this first to a J, it's going to throw an error and say, oops, let's make it an actual string here. It's going to say that the object does not support item assignment. However, if we were to do the same thing with B, we would then see that B now says Jello, and A, since it can't be changed, says hello. The next sequence type is a tuple, which is an ordered collection, just like a list. The order you put them in is the order that they will be displayed in, and it can contain multiple data types, just like a list. And you can index it, just like a list. However, you cannot change it afterwards. And so a tuple is placed inside parentheses. So you would have A, put our parentheses down, and we have 1, 2.0. We'll go ahead and throw a imaginary complex number in there and a string. And as you see, instead of being in the square brackets like we had for the list, they're in curly brackets, and you can subscript them as well. However, if you wanted to change the value of, let's see, A1, that is going to be number 2.0. If we wanted to change that to 3.0, it's going to tell you that you can't assign it, you can't update tuples. So these are good for things where you want to have an ordered list of, let's say, operations that you don't want to be able to update. Next, we move into the mapping type, which is a dictionary. And as you think, it's got key value pairs, just like a dictionary that you use in school. You would have a key that would be a word, and then a value, which could be a sentence or any other object. So the keys are what's called mutable, which means they're unchangeable, so they could be strings or numbers. And the values, on the other hand, are what's called immutable, which means they're changeable, and they can be any other data type, including these built-in types or any other data type that we will learn how to define further on in this series. So those are done with the curly brackets. So let's say we have 3.14 as our key, and then we will call that pi as our value, place a comma in between, and then we're going to say we have gravity as our key, and we will do 9.8 as our value. And as you can see, we have all of those showing up in the dictionary. And then if I go ahead and grab gravity, just like I'd be indexing into an array, except you're indexing into a list. However, you're indexing using this key value that we discussed previously. And you can see that that comes back. And we could do the exact same thing using 3.14 as our key, and we get back pi. The next data type is a Boolean data type. And Boolean is just true or false. True or false. So these are things that you're going to use in like an if statement. So if something's true, if something's false, or you can use them as a flag. So while you have something running in your script, something happens, right? It's after 11 o'clock in the morning, you flip the flag to true, and then you can use that in a statement down the road to do comparisons. And the final built-in data type we have is called the set. It is unique, and there's no duplicates. So if you add a duplicate to it, it will just drop that duplicate off. It is an unordered collection, kind of like a bag. And it is mutable, meaning that the elements cannot be changed. You can add elements, you can remove elements, but you can't actually change something that exists. So those are also done with the curly bracket, except you don't place the key in front of them. You write them out much like you would write a list. So we'd have 1, 2.0, our complex number, and then a string. And as you can see, we get the curly brackets, but there's no way to index into this. You can't go 0, right? This object is not subscriptable. So the way you actually get the objects back out of a set would be to use a for loop, which we will discuss in a further video, but to give you a real quick demonstration. And as you can see, it lists out everything that's in there. As you add and remove things from a set, the order can change. So you can't guarantee that 1's always going to be the first one, and like and subscribe is always going to be the last one. As you see, when I printed this out, I put it in as 1, 2.0, 3J, and like and subscribe. However, when it came back out, the 1 came first, and then the like and subscribe, and then the 2.0, then the 3J. So really, it's much like a bag that you can only put a single copy of any object into. So that really sums up all of the built-in data types in Python. These are extremely useful for the basics of Python, and they do provide the foundation for the larger and more complex data types that are available in Python. Thanks, everyone. I hope you guys learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.